Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. As soon as we ended the show last week, of course, news comes out that the NFL is shortening their preseason, or at least that's the rumor. I don't know if they actually set it in stone, but it's what we talked about on the show last week. I'm hoping that it sticks. They've been rumored to do it, and I don't know what's going on with the XFL. I've heard that ESPN came out and said, which is another thing we talked about, they said that they are not one of the secret bidders. I don't know if you saw that, but they said that they are looking forward to work with whoever the owner ends up being. So the way they said it made it seem like they were interested at first, but maybe the bidding got too high or some of the other things weren't set in stone. But it made me think, like, okay, if they're in it and they're out, I'm hoping that not another network buys it because, like, NBC owned part of the original XFL, and then CBS was helping with, like, the AAF, and both of those failed. So maybe it's better if there's just a businessman that wants it to succeed, and if they have a partner in ESPN, that's good news. But if the NFL, if they cut the preseason, like, maybe they can make it work where we don't have that many meaningless games. I don't know if it's going to be scrimmages or what, but at this point, anything they cancel just makes me more worried about the season. Like, I don't know what else. Yeah, you can't just keep canceling things and then say, like, it's all fine. Here we go. We're going to roll out the regular season. I mean, the preseason was there where you could have had no fans. Like, I know that they make money off that, and the owners love to squeeze every penny out of season ticket holders, but just open it up. No fans. Have your preseason game, put it on television, get your TV dollars, and use it as a dry run to see how you're keeping players safe. Instead, by pushing back these preseason games, they're going to try to have fans in the stands, and they're going to try to do whatever the healthiest capacity could be. I mean, if a doctor come out and says that they could do 50%, they're going to do 50%. That's how business works. So I wanted to make sure we hit that on the top of the show. Do you have anything on the preseason stuff, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's smart at this point for them to at least try to do that. One of the things that I saw that they were potentially trying to propose was actually putting like a percentage of the player salaries into an escrow account. I don't know if you saw this, but the owners were talking about concerns about financially making the season work if they're not able to have fans in the stands. And so that they were looking at, well, possibly taking part of the player salaries and using that towards maintaining the operations if they do go forward with the season.
And see, some of that stuff just annoys me because, like, why are the players giving up their salary? I mean, like, I know it's on the owners, but if there was a boom where, like, you're going to get a kickback of, like, let's say merchandise sales or something, do you think the owners are going to immediately go out and give their players a bump? Hell no. Like, they get that 100%, and that's part of owning the business. That's why the stuff where they say, like, oh, well, the players are going to take this or that. I mean, like, for college, it makes sense because they're universities. Like, there's a different thing when you hear of a football coach taking a salary cut as part of this or, like, administrative costs. But, like, when the owner, they're not saying that they're going to give that back in revenue. Like, what if they had record revenue because, let's say TV ratings go through the roof this year. So by week 5, they're getting extra money based on the ads or something. They work out a deal. Are they going to immediately give that back to the players and say, yeah, we made a mistake? Like, hell no, they're not. So, I don't know. That kind of stuff annoys me. And speaking of contracts, though, our big news today, Patrick Mahomes signed a $500 million deal. So $500 million. It's the largest in sports history. It's a 10-year deal. 10 years. It's not going to happen. What are you saying?
Jerry Jones, I'm so sorry for you.
Dude, he's not going to get $500 million. I'm just putting it out there because people are going nuts. It's actually a smart deal by the Chiefs, and I'm going to explain why this doesn't work out mostly ever. It's because he's still on his rookie deal, so they structured it as an extension of his rookie contract. They're not taking a salary cap hit for like the next couple years or whatever. I don't know what the exact time frame is. I think I saw 2024, and once that time frame's up, the Chiefs can just cut him, and they don't have to pay any of it. So this is more of a posturing thing where like they have it set up. It's so team friendly. It's ridiculous. There's also a clause in there that they can convert some of his salary into a signing bonus, like a good chunk of it, to get under the salary cap. Because the first thing you think of, you see this deal, you're like, oh, they'll never be able to sign any players. But because it's like part of his rookie deal, it's just a genius deal on the team's part. Because, like, let's be honest, he's not going to get $500 million. And I would be surprised if he was still there because of this contract. And the way it's structured, there's like a no trade clause for the first part, but then he can either force a trade where they don't have to pay him, or they could just, like I said, they could just cut him or whatever. Like, there are some outs for both sides. So I don't think other players are going to try to follow this. Just because you get so much money up front. Yeah, it's a gigantic deal, but you don't want to leave yourself open to this. And so for people wondering like, oh, is this going to be a new trend? I don't think it is. And the reason it worked is because he's so young. Like, how many quarterbacks come in and win a Super Bowl that young? Like Ben Roethlisberger? That's pretty much it. I mean, even Tom Brady had been in the league for a couple years. I don't know how long his rookie deal was, but he only got in because of an injured guy. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he sat on the bench behind Brett Favre for a few years. It's not like you usually have rookie quarterbacks come in and win a Super Bowl, because there are guys like Lamar Jackson that are hyped up, but he hasn't won a playoff game. So, like, would you risk your franchise on a quarterback like that? Not a lot of guys get it done. So, smart move by the Chiefs. I'm just throwing that out there. People are like amazed at the amount of money being thrown around, but it's almost like I think it's just like a salary cap thing. When you look at deals done in other leagues, after a while, they just kind of get thrown away. That's what this feels like to me. It was kind of like, hey, you won the Super Bowl. Great. We're going to extend your rookie deal, and we're going to get you a ton of publicity. Sign this. What athlete's not going to sign a $500 million deal? So
true. I mean, when you look at it, you know, the first thing that came to mind when I saw the contract was Roethlisberger's $100 million contract, and how in the process, like over the following seasons, he's been willing to negotiate with Pittsburgh and restructure his deal and do different things to help them with the cap. To that end, you know, if Mahomes is willing to do that, then I think that it's going to end up being a good deal for them. To me, with the way that the league is right now, let's just hypothetically say at this point, Jerry Jones throws the money at Dak, and then someone like Aaron Rodgers gets another deal, or Russell Wilson, and pushes even more. You know, do you end up getting into a situation where a Deshaun Watson, or even it gets back to where Mahomes is like, you know what, this deal isn't good enough, especially if he wins another Super Bowl, to be like, no, I need to be the highest paid, and I'm just going to sit out. You know, because you have so many players that they use that leverage of, well, if you don't restructure my deal, then I'm not playing. And I just worry about, you know, when you're signing that big of a deal, and then you come back and go, no, that's not good enough. You know, is that setting the table for a disaster?
I can see where you're coming from, but with a deal this big, they can just convert it. Like I said, they can just give it to him as cash. And so a lot of deals don't have that in place, because once it becomes a signing bonus or whatever, I don't know if he has to sign it every year. Like, I'm not sure how the contract's set up, but once that happens, that's guaranteed money. It's not like he's restructuring like Le'Veon Bell's thing was. his money wasn't guaranteed. So if he got hurt, Steelers could cut him. It's kind of like the same thing. So to your point, I think we'll see what happens in 2024, 2025, where the deal's almost like half over. Will he win another Super Bowl? I mean, if he wins 3 Super Bowls in a row, then they'll probably honor the deal. Because, like, why wouldn't you? But, like, if he's on a Tom Brady streak, that's the only way this deal works out. But like you said, Ben Roethlisberger, he's been restructuring deals. We know Tom Brady takes deals all the time and tries to get teammates brought in, and because you have to do that to win. So we got to see what kind of player he is first. Is he going to be a team first, or is he going to be focused on himself? And all those guys you named, they're not winners. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has 1 Super Bowl, and he's kind of fallen apart. He'd be the only one. And at this point in his career, the way Green Bay is like going through and falling out, he should just be looking for a team like Peyton Manning where he can go in and get his 2nd Super Bowl and kind of cement his legacy. That's what I would do if I was him. That's what Peyton Manning did. He had 1, and he looked around the league. He went around to all kind of stuff and different teams and did workouts. I think he actually just had a news article I read because he mentioned that he had Jim Harbaugh over his house or something because he was really considering the 49ers at that point. It was like him, David Cutcliffe, they were all out playing catch. So, like, I mean, that's the kind of stuff Aaron Rodgers could get done. Like, let's say if Ben Roethlisberger decided that he was going to retire and the Steelers have a young core, good defense, I mean, like, maybe take a look. Like, what else do you have to lose? But those other guys like Dak, if Jerry Jones signed him, that would be a crazy waste of money. Because you're in the same situation you were with Tony Romo or like the Lions are with Matt Stafford. At some point, you have to realize that, hey, if I'm going to pay this guy all this money, playoff wins count for perception, jersey sales, anything. People don't want a guy that only wins periodically in the regular season. So you got to win. You got to be consistent. That's why I brought up Lamar Jackson earlier, Matt. If he doesn't start winning in the playoffs, no one's going to care. No one's going to care. If he goes 0-3 or, 0-4, like, people aren't going to take him serious. You can get all the regular season records and whatever, but if you don't win in the playoffs, it's a joke. So at least Mahomes got over that hump.
Good point. I think that's relevant, but I also know that there's going to be players that are going to force their hand. When you look back at AB and Le'Veon Bell, they hit points where they were both just like, we're under contract, but no, I need to restructure my deal.
Yeah, but they were focused on themselves, and look at them now. Forgotten. No one really talks about them. I mean, that's the fact. So if they were smarter and took a team-first approach, think of how marketable they would be if they actually won a Super Bowl or 2 together. Then you go get the money. I mean, yeah, you could always get hurt, but you're having off-the-field issues anyway. So, like, all kinds of things can happen off the field. You got to keep your head on straight. And I think Mahomes is the type of player that looks like he could do that. And then that's where you're talking about if he wins multiple Super Bowls, do you keep paying him? Yeah, but like, I just don't think that this deal goes through. They'll cut it. Maybe they'll add it. Like, it would be crazy for them to like get rid of him if he keeps winning. But then, like I said, you're on a Tom Brady type streak. That's very, very rare. It's only happened once. I mean, your closest, like, look at the competitors that hung around the league for the same amount of time, like Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger. They won Super Bowls early in their career, and then they kind of just faded. Tom Brady is old, and he keeps winning. I mean, even like Drew Brees, like, you win one, and then what? You get regular season stats. People like you. Whatever you still have, you like your own off-the-field issue stuff. It's like, okay, at some point you got to win consistently. People won't remember you in 10 years. They're not going to look back and say, oh, yeah, you should have seen this quarterback that was awesome a few years ago, like Drew Brees. People aren't going to say that. It's all going to come back to Tom Brady or Maybe someone else that steps up. If it could be Mahomes, we don't know. So, I got one other NFL thing. The Steelers, dude, some of their players are going nuts with this market right now. So we had Juju and James Conner surprise their parents with new houses. Just randomly. I try to keep up on my Steelers news, get my alerts. And I'm like, didn't I just see someone buy their parent a house? So shout out to those guys putting in work in the offseason because I know buying a house is such a pain. I couldn't imagine buying a house for someone else. That would drive me crazy.
Well, the good thing about it is they have the money that they can afford a moving company, so you wouldn't have to do it yourself.
They probably didn't even have to go look at the house. They just knew someone. They're like, hey, I got this great house. They got it sold. They probably don't have to wait for a bid to go in. Privilege, man. Let's see. Major League Baseball. So another thing that we talked about on the show, the travel. I said that they should keep it as regional as possible, and they announced their schedule. And I've seen people complain about this. And at some point, they can only do so much. They were saying like some teams have longer flights or longer travel. Like, yeah, but that's just based on geography. Like there's no team around Seattle. What are they supposed to do? Not play? The other situation is you could temporarily move the team, but then you have a whole other slew of issues. Like where's the safest city? What are you going to do? What are you going to have all this other stuff? I mean, I think it's pretty good. I like how they kept it like Central is pretty much in the Central. Then you have like the East Coast teams. Of course, like you get down to the Florida, there's no one by them. You can't really do too many bus trips. So they're doing 60 games. I said a few weeks ago I didn't think the season was going to happen. We have players that are opting out. Where do we go from here? Like, if I was a player, you have to seriously consider it. They're asking you to take a pay cut. If you're a pitcher, you're taking a pay cut, you could blow your arm out, be done forever. So it's not like you're out there. There's no hero moment at this time. We don't even know what the playoffs are going to be like. They're going to have an extended playoffs. You could just sit out for the first couple months, see if your team's going to be any good, and then jump in it right in the playoffs if you're worried about winning a World Series. Plus, I've been having some debates with some people. What kind of like asterisk are people going to put beside this season? Like, oh yeah, your team won, but it was only on that weird season. Like, it is more along the lines of like talking about college football, which we're going to get to in a bit. But like even the Major League Baseball, you're playing a shortened season. You have the NHL and NBA. They're trying to put together their stuff, but NBA, they're having the same issue. People testing positive, people opting out. Their commissioner, he's not positive at all. He keeps making comments about like, yeah, it might not happen now. Like, isn't the job of the commissioner to set the order of the whole league? By making little comments like that, it makes me think they're not happening. In baseball, like, I want to see it. It's a little bit different. Like, you could play outside. Everyone naturally has their distance. It's not like you're really going to be coming into contact with people unless you're running the bases. The catcher would probably be the most at risk. I mean, just because of the position. You're just right behind. I mean, you have the umpire behind you. I guess if they went to the digital, that's one less person down there. I don't know if they're doing that. I think that was only in the minor leagues, but we'll see how it happens. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, overall, I think it's kind of followed guidelines that you've said before about trying to regionalize some of the games and doing like either pods or some kind of system like that. So I'm kind of excited just to see how that's going to look. You know, I know that with the whole Seattle and Texas issue where you're having that those teams cluster together. I mean, another option that you could do is to take Texas and just lump them with the teams that are already in the South, like Atlanta and Tampa Bay, and just having like a South pod, creating another one. That way you're not having teams all up and down the East Coast together. And then that kind of creates a fourth pod where you're having that some of those teams like flip-flopping around a little bit, but I think logistically that's about as good as you're going to get, trying to keep it so that you're not just playing the same teams over and over again, and it gives the fans something to watch.
To be honest, I don't even care about playing the same teams over and over again. It's weird to me that they're trying to keep the season similar when they could be just experimenting with this year. Like, that's why I had said, why not just make the entire thing the playoffs? And then you just have like round robins, and then you're eliminating teams as they go. And you try to like negotiate a better TV contract, because right now, nothing's on TV. Like, there are no sports. Like, we're still having people air old sporting events. You have like NASCAR gets its entire day because where was I? I was somewhere and they just had NASCAR on the entire day. And I thought, okay, yeah, like that used to be a thing for like Daytona, but when other sports are on, they show the race and like that's it. They don't have like, it's not like there's an NFL Today or whatever that show is in the morning where Coach Cowher's there hanging out with a bunch of other guys. Like that's not a thing in NASCAR. You don't wake up at 8 and then turn on like regular TV and see people talking NASCAR in the entire day. Maybe the Speed Channel, but like that's equivalent to like the NFL Network, so who cares? So call them up and say, hey, I have an idea for like a new package. If you're really worried about this, I mean, you're still going to have issues no matter what, though, because like I said, you have two teams in Texas. You can't do a pod system with those two teams. You have one team like in Colorado in the middle of like nowhere. There's no one by them. So you can try to lump them together with like Seattle or whatever, but you're still going to have some teams that just have that far distance. I mean, actually, if I'm looking at the map, those four teams would be it, because you have four teams closer to LA with Arizona, the two LA teams or whatever they're called, and then the Giants. So you could do pods of four, but then you're still stuck with the Southeast where you have two Florida teams, Atlanta, and then you're going to have to just pick whatever team gets the short straw and has to travel out of the Midwest, or is Washington, is that too many in the Northeast? And then you could just have pods of four, or I know they have a weird number of teams, so it makes it tougher. But do pods of four, pods of five, and then you just play those games, those teams, and then you have like the top two teams move on, and all those other teams get to go home. Like, hey, you lost in your pod. That's how the World Cup goes. You train the entire year, and you lose like in one round, and you're done. So that's what I would have liked to seen out of some of these sports. Like I had talked about the NBA being perfect for it, because that would have been the easiest way to say, hey, we're having a single day tournament, a single elimination tournament or whatever. You lose, you go home. We test you, you play the game, you go home. We don't have to worry about setting up a hotel for you anymore. Because that's what the big issue is. Like, you have to have a hotel. In Major League Baseball, they're trying to limit the amount of days in the city. You're not going to be in like LA or another big city for 5 days at a time. So just be creative with it. That's what I would have liked to see. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, overall I was satisfied with it. I mean, I think it's interesting to see something that we've talked about in the past actually being put to use here, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then going further, I think just seeing what the schedule will look like as we get further away from the the potential of being locked back down again.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from another point, the NHL, they're set to renew theirs in Canada. And I understand that you have teams flying in and all these other logistic things, but like at that point, I wish they would have just tried to do it in the Dakotas or Wyoming, wherever they had looked, because there weren't like any cases back in June. Like I mean, I guess they did have cases in all the states, but it wasn't as bad. And I feel like they could have limited it a lot better if they had the players there. And like I said, they have private jets. They don't need to use the commercial airport because I hear people talk about it and I don't think they understand. Like these teams, they have money. Yeah, they're crying poor and trying to take salaries from their players, but they own the jet. Even some of the universities, and I've heard that, and we'll get into that in a little bit here, but like I've heard them say, oh, we're going to try to keep it on a bus. Like we want to be able to bus to schools. Some of the universities are so big, that's not a point for them. It'd probably be safer for them just to fly on their private jet to the game and fly back. They have one thing they have to disinfect to make sure that it's all clean. You get to the game, you fly home. For like the NHL, you do your little pod. When the team's out, they go home. They're done. Then every week that goes on, you have less and less people that you have to test. And I know that that's why, like the NBA, if they could have just had people agree, and same with the NHL, I think if they would have already been at the date for the playoffs to start, I think both of those leagues would have already played. I think what happened was you had too many owners that were close to a playoff spot, and they know the type of fans and jersey sales that brings, just being in the playoffs, that they didn't want to risk giving that up. And that's why we're stuck with, I think NHL is like an August return now. And it's like you're going to compete with all these leagues going at the same time, football, baseball, hockey, basketball now. It's going to be an overload, and are people even going to watch anymore? So, you think they are?
I think if it's on, basically what it'll do is I think it'll just draw the people that primarily follow it will be interested, but you won't grab as many casual fans because there'll be too many other options.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes down to like contracts with TV networks, and like even the NHL, they have a problem with the Stanley Cup being thrown on NBC Sports. I mean, I've been laughing because YouTube TV, they raised their money and their cost again. It's like $65 now. What's the point of cutting cable if you're going to pay YouTube the same amount that you're going to pay a regular cable company for the same crap channels? Like it's like people don't realize, like, yo, just don't pay them. Don't pay them. Just cut it. And then they'll have to offer like an a la carte channel. I think Sling TV is the only one that does that. But it splits up a lot of the big ones. Like you either get ESPN and some of their sports, or you get like Fox Sports and the other networks. Unless you're going to pay the full price. Where I think they do that to keep other people interested. But if they were to offer like a one only sports channel for like $20-$25, I think a lot of people would go for that. And you'd see a lot of those other TV channels just die because no one watches them. So, makes me laugh. People were like, yeah, I subscribe to YouTube TV. I'm like, you pay the same amount. I think it's even cheaper bundled. If I bundle my internet and my cable, I think my cable would be like $40 a month or whatever it is. I can't remember the last offer I got in the mail. So you're going to brag about being hip and on YouTube TV? You pay more. That's all. Someone was like, yeah, but they have a better DVR because it's Google. I'm like, you can buy your own DVR and DVR your own stuff. That's what I have. Then you don't have to rely on someone else. So that's another random complaint. Last thing I had, I know, trying to keep the show short. I don't even know how long we've gone. The Ivy League, they're announcing on the 8th, which is when, if you're not watching the video, that's when this is going to be released as a podcast. So if you download this, you'll know. You'll have to look it up. We'll probably talk about it next week because I think it's going to be the first domino. A lot of their universities like Harvard, they're letting people on campus, but they're doing all of their instruction online, which makes me think they're not doing sports. I think they're going to announce tomorrow that they're done with fall sports because the people that are going to be on campus, the only thing they're doing is labs. And those labs get millions in research money. There's no way they can shut them down. Some of them have probably been going all summer, even though the other things are closed. Like let's say they have like a virus lab or like a hospital and things like that. They might be shut down for like undergrad students, but grad students are still doing their work. Because like the government could be paying that contract or some other research group. So that stuff's still going on. And the way they put their press conference or their press release out made me think that they're only staying open to do business and not to educate. I mean, you can take the courses online, but I wonder how many people would just take a gap year and just say, you know what, I'm not going to pay for that. You could just go on, was it like, I think iTunes U, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a bunch of like online Stanford courses that you could watch online and then pay $300 for, something like that. And you'd get an official certificate from Stanford. So like, what's the difference of doing that in your off year compared to actually going to school? Because that's the one thing that I think a lot of people are going to have to think about. But has me worried. I think the Big Ten, they announced, or at least some of their, I think it was it Rutgers, that they need to make a decision in 2 weeks. I don't know why 2 weeks. They already have most schools already have the athletes on campus. So yeah, I understand you have to get your schedule in place and things like that. But why make that call in 2 weeks? Like, what's going to change? You going to send those guys home? They're already there. I don't understand. So I'm a little bit more plugged in with college. And what I've been hearing, the busting that I brought up earlier, some universities only want to play where they can bus their team to the game and bus their team back. So that makes sense if your universities are close. Like let's say like NC State to Duke to UNC, and you fill out your schedule with maybe App State, Wake Forest, and you try to play like a regional schedule only. That's something that you could do where you bust them to. What if you're Syracuse? I mean, that's a lot longer of a bus drive. Or you're Minnesota. How many other teams, Division I teams, are located around you? And so I think that's why Rutgers is waiting to announce that they're not going to have football or fall sports. And if they did, it'd be weird if they only had football.
But, I wonder, with that being said, how many teams are going to capitalize on, if a school like Rutgers decides they're not playing, but then you have schools like the Big 12 that are, how much of that then is going to affect recruiting? So I think they really have to be careful about pulling the trigger too early and pulling the plug on the season, because if they do that, guaranteed the schools that do end up sticking around and playing are going to capitalize on that for recruiting and just be like, hey, you can go to Rutgers, but are you even going to play? Because they just showed that they're willing to shut down.
That's a good point. And for the Ivy League, there's some rumors that they might push to the spring and only play conference games. I think they set a 7-game schedule. I don't know how many teams are actually in the Ivy League, if that's you're playing every team or not. But even then, the Ivy League is a pretty regional league. It's not like they're spread out across the United States. So if they can't even get it done, and like I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're going to announce all fall sports are moving to the spring except for football. I mean, they don't have a lot of people that get drafted from their league, but I think that's going to be another thing. How's the NFL going to use this? Because if you have teams playing in the spring, they're either going to have to push back the draft. They're going to have to do something. They can't play a full college schedule in the spring. Let's say it ends in April and May. Take a couple weeks off and immediately go right into NFL training camp, that would be way too hard on the body. Like, I think the people that are seniors this year or juniors or draft eligible even, they're getting short end of the stick if they get pushed to the spring. That's why I'd rather see a shortened regional schedule. And my pipe dream is maybe it will extend the playoffs a little bit and it would just open it up. Because, like, if you look at that, I think it was it Sports Illustrated or someone, I don't know if we shared it on social media, but they were doing a what if college conferences were regional. Like, what if they were this year? And you just had, like, one team, whoever won that pod or whatever, they have a chance for a bowl game or a playoff spot. And everyone else gets to stay home because that's the safer option. Like, you're not going to go to the Birmingham Bowl if you're Pitt. Is that the last bowl they're in? I don't know what it's called. But, like, what if you go, like, let's say you play a shortened schedule of, like, 8-10 games or something. You go, like, 4-4. You don't deserve a bowl game. That's the equivalent of 6-6. You don't deserve that anyway. So maybe we'll start to see some change because it's not good for the students. It's good for what? Bowl sponsors, but I don't know. They're like, I've heard from Michigan, and I think I think Sports Illustrated even had a thing on this. I've heard that the Washington game is pretty much canceled at this point. I think in the Sports Illustrated issue, they also said the Arkansas State game was canceled, like one of the cupcakes for Michigan. And so they're looking to either try to fill those with the directional Michigan schools like Eastern, Western, Central, if they have openings, or doubling up with Big Ten rivals, which is my show ender. How dumb would you be to schedule Ohio State twice? Because that's one of the teams that's rumored out there. Because that would be the most Michigan year, Matt. I had the schedule for you. I sent it to you so that I had it for the show because I knew this was going to be part of my ender. But they would have, let's say they open up with Ohio State. Then they keep the Ball State game. Then they play Central Michigan. Then they get Wisconsin, Penn State at home. They only have 4 road games at Michigan State, at Minnesota, later at Rutgers if they even have a game, and then the last game at Ohio State. So all the other games they normally win at home, the Big Ten tough games, Wisconsin and Penn State at home. Michigan State traditionally has played them tough, but they have a new coach. That's going to be a tough ask. So Michigan could beat Ohio State in the opener, end up 11-0, only to lose at Ohio State, probably get killed because they always do Thanksgiving weekend, like 62-30. And that's generous if we even score 30. Only to lose the Big Ten, Matt, because that first game wouldn't count. It's like a stupid non-conference game that they're just shoving out there. Like, that would be the most Michigan thing ever. 11-1, sitting at home while Ohio State represents in whatever fake put together playoffs they put out there. So I hope that doesn't happen.
I'd love to see it happen because then it would just be the Big Ten eating itself.
Well, I have another one for you. This is my other scenario. I forgot that I had this up. So Penn State, on the other hand, there's rumors that 4 Big Ten teams aren't going to play this year. And I think Rutgers is definitely one. I've heard Maryland. I don't know who the other 2 are. Someone told me that it was Northwestern. And I mean, I guess that makes sense if they're following like the Ivy's academic first schedule, but they're kind of centrally located around a couple of teams that if they're worried about like not having a regional schedule, that doesn't make any sense. Because you could even add in like Northern Illinois and things like that. I could see Minnesota for the reason I mentioned earlier. Like, they don't have a lot of other D1 teams in their state. So if they're worried about something, or possibly another team out west, I don't know about Nebraska because they're kind of even further. If you don't have games lined up and you can't fill them with like your old Big 12 buddies, I mean, like, what are you going to do? But let's say Penn State opts for like a regional schedule. Because I have up their past 3 years, Matt, they've only lost to Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan in the Big Ten, really. They lost to Minnesota last year on the road, which was a big upset by a Minnesota team that ended up being ranked in the top 10 for a while. And then they lost in Kentucky, or to Kentucky in their bowl game the one year. So let's say you can build a regional schedule for Penn State where you don't play Michigan, Michigan State, or Ohio State. And you fill that with Syracuse, let's say Maryland plays, or even if they don't, you try to fill in with Pitt, West Virginia, because West Virginia is going to be in a world of trouble. What if Penn State goes like undefeated in their Yankee schedule? Do they get into playoffs? Do they have playoffs?
I think this is a year that everyone, if you win your games, it's so random. It's like a 1920s type deal that you'll have like 6 national champions. Because they'll just be like, no, I'm the national champ, and just hang a banner.
Well, I mean, you're making sense, because the reason the Ohio State and Michigan game is like plausible is because Ohio State was supposed to go to Oregon, or vice versa. Oregon was supposed to go to Ohio. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't have their schedule memorized. But the Michigan was supposed to go to Wisconsin, so it's very easy for them just to say, you know what, we're just going to play each other. Work it out. Like, it's the biggest game on TV anyway. I mean, a lot of times it beats most of the bowl games combined. Like that first week or whatever, you get millions of more people watching the Michigan-Ohio State game on Thanksgiving. So what if they just kicked off the season? Especially because normally college football kicks off the week before the NFL. So you're like, hey, sports are back with the biggest rivalry in college football. No fans, though, at the big house. Well, I guess you could put some fans in or whatever the rules are.
I bet that if they go the no fans route, this just to piss you off, I could see the NCAA and even up through like some of the other professional leagues where they go to some kind of format where, hey, instead of broadcasting these games on the general cable networks, that they go to like the obscure like networks or like a pay-per-view type thing where it's like, oh, well, you can pay to watch whatever game you want and be a season ticket holder from your house.
Oh my gosh, Matt, why would you even bring up pay-per-view? Why would you bring that up? Keep that to yourself. Don't say that out loud. People could be listening to this, calling up execs right now and thinking, you know what? I've never thought of that. Like, why wouldn't we have a pay-per-view? It worked for WrestleMania. They had their weird Undertaker thing. I've heard. I didn't see it, but I've heard a lot of people complaining that like they bought WrestleMania this year only to have it pre-taped in like an Undertaker cemetery match or something. So like, what if sports did that? It makes sense, but you'd get them back and it would only set the future up for a horrible future. To be honest though, depending on the price, like let's say because there are so many games that each game is like, I don't know, $10, $20. For a lot of people, that's cheaper than a lot of like other TV things if that's the only thing you watch all year. But I just think it's too many commercials right now. Television watching's up, but a lot of it's just like Netflix and streaming. Like those services are up. I don't know if like actual people watching live TV is up. I haven't seen numbers on that, so it'd be interesting, but I hope it doesn't happen. I did have one more thing. Your boy Jimbo, he got hit with penalties because the Texas A&M team, they did the old Rich Rod, and they weren't counting their hours right for workouts and recruiting and stuff like that. So,
oops.
I've heard that their 1-year probation, like they've already served it. Although I don't know exactly because every time I look for news, no one really knows. I think a lot of beat writers right now are laid off. And so I haven't seen like a concrete story saying that they've already served it, like that they knew this was coming. Unless that was another team that I read about and I'm just getting it confused. So, which could be like teams are just like, you know what? I know this is coming and we're having a down year. So we're just going to take our scholarship limit reduction or whatever they offer. But
the thing that was interesting with it is they were still getting hit with the penalties, even though the assistant coach in question was no longer on staff and was at Tennessee now. So I was interesting to see how they were going to play that out when they finally do, like, formally set whatever they're going to do.
Well, the basketball coach for Oklahoma State, they just hit them with a bunch of penalties or whatever. And the same type of thing where it's an assistant coach, he's no longer there. You're setting that precedent, but then you have all these other basketball schools. So if I was A&M, I'd file an injunction or just threaten to sue them. Like, why not? And I would easily point at Kansas or one of the other schools that are awaiting. Like, why are you hitting Texas A&M so fast, NCAA? Not that I have a dog in the fight, but if I were them, I would start playing a little bit of hardball. Because there were how many teams listed on that payroll thing from the FBI investigation, Matt? That's pretty much hard evidence unless you're the NCAA standing up and saying the FBI's evidence is fake.
Yep.
Like, there's really no other course of action. So, like, if I were them, I would just say, NCAA, we're ignoring this. This is an assistant that no longer works here. And there's a precedent set because this school, this school, this school, this school, this school. Just list off all whatever they were. I mean, I know Penn State was on it. Maryland was on it. Like a bunch of other teams had paid. Nothing's happened to them. So why not? A&M step up. If you call out the NCAA, they don't do anything. We've seen that in the UNC case. They don't do anything. You just call their bluff and then just wait to the last minute and they won't do anything and they hope people forget about it. I mean, Bill Self's already threatened to sue from Kansas, saying like, look, you're throwing me under the bus. You've already had this. I think, who was the guy, like Arizona? They had Arizona dead to rights. They've done absolutely nothing. So, like, it's laughable if Jimbo just accepts this. If I were a Texas A&M fan, I would be pissed. And I wouldn't be writing the NCAA. I'd be writing the leadership of the university and saying, what are you doing? Like, the playbook's already out. UNC put it out there.
Yep.
Use it. So, anything else you have this week?
Good news out of Florida State. Mike Norvell, they did an interview with him, and he's going to bring fullbacks back to Florida State. Last time we had fullbacks, national championships.
Wait, did he text his players first to ask them if it was all right?
He actually just said, this is what we're doing. Assertive and authoritative.
Well, last time I heard him say he did something, it supposedly didn't happen. So until I see it on the field, Matt.
If we're saying it's happening, it's happening. Fullbacks are back and winning's back.
Hey, Michigan has a fullback. We've won a little bit, but not that much. So
there you go.
So you have to see how much winning you actually want to do. You want to beat Clemson?
And if you want to be a winner, check out the Southbound shop. Go to our website. Get yourself something.
Yeah, definitely support us in these times because we don't know when sports are coming back other than NASCAR and whatever else, golf. I don't know. The Olympics, they got pushed back till next year. Is that even going to happen? Who knows? We need one league to step up, and it's already a week into July, Matt. It hasn't happened.
Yep.
So, I don't know. We'll keep the show going. I'm really hoping that there's football. So, definitely tell your friends. Go to southboundsports.com. We've been putting stuff up there, but obviously not a lot of stuff to talk about. So, keep listening to the podcast. At least stay subscribed. And when sports comes back, you can pick up your listening. But thanks for those that are listening. And we will see you next week.